My family abandoned us when my wife got pregnant. Years later, they came begging to be part of my son's life. They wanted a second chance without ever apologizing. I stood at the door and told them the truth they refused to hear. Now they are the ones left outside, waiting. On the day I needed my family the most, they chose their reputation over me. Now years later, they want to hold the son they once treated like a shameful secret. And I don't know if I can ever let them. I'm not even sure where to begin. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it feel more real. And honestly, there is a part of me that wonders if keeping this buried would have hurt less. But it has been sitting on my chest for so long that I think it's time to let it out. My name is Soren. I come from a small conservative Christian family rooted in tradition and appearances. Religion wasn't just a part of our lives, it was the backbone of our identity. Every Sunday was sacred, not just because of faith, but because of the eyes that watched, the judgments that whispered, and the pride that came from being seen as the good family. My father, Silas, was the kind of man people deferred to, his stern demeanor and silver hair giving him an air of unchallengeable authority. He was a pillar in our church community, a man who spoke little but whose presence filled every room. My mother, Marlo, was his perfect counterpart, always smiling, always organizing bake sales, Bible studies, charity drives, her public face seamless and practiced, her private expectations razor sharp. Behind closed doors the warmth faded, replaced by an unrelenting pressure to uphold the image she and Silas had so carefully constructed. My older brother, Thayer, was their crown jewel. Athletic, handsome, and devout, he moved through life like he was born to be admired. Everything he did was celebrated, no matter how small. Every accolade was announced at church with beaming pride. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the cautious one, the son who always felt like he was almost but not quite enough. Our lives revolved around Sunday services, potlucks, Bible studies, choir practices, and youth retreats. Faith was important, yes, but reputation was vital. The appearance of virtue mattered more than the substance of it. We were expected to look perfect, act perfect, and most importantly, to never give anyone a reason to whisper about us. Everything was about the image. Sunday mornings were a frenzy of ironing clothes, polishing shoes, and forcing smiles. Every prayer at the dinner table was another chance to prove our piety to one another, a performance that left little room for authenticity. Even minor infractions were met with overwhelming disapproval. A missed Bible verse recitation was not just a mistake, it was an embarrassment. A poorly behaved child was not a child needing guidance, but a reflection of failed parenting. It drilled into us that mistakes were sins against the family's standing, not just our own growth moments. Growing up, I never questioned the way things were. I tried to live up to it, swallowing every doubt, every moment of exhaustion, because love in our house often felt conditional, tied not to who we were, but to how we appeared. Love was given freely only when it came with compliance. Approval had to be earned, again and again, with spotless behavior and careful presentation. There was no room for vulnerability, no space to falter, no safety net to catch you if you slipped. Only the cold, aching knowledge that love could be withdrawn at the first sign of imperfection. For the most part, I succeeded, until I met Elowen. Elowen was light. She was different from the girls I had grown up around. She laughed easily, loved fiercely, and carried this genuine kindness that didn't feel rehearsed. She didn't come from a perfect family or a spotless background, but she carried herself with a sincerity that drew people in. My family loved her instantly, or at least they loved the version of her that fit their narrative. Elowen's soft-spoken manner, her polite laughter, and her willingness to attend church services without complaint checked every box they had in mind for a good Christian wife. Marlo would beam whenever Elowen helped clean up after events, or volunteered to bring food to potlucks. Silas would nod approvingly when she bowed her head in prayer, quietly commenting later that she knew her place, and would make a fine homemaker. Even Thayer joked once that I had finally done something right by bringing her into the family. They paraded her around at church functions, introducing her to everyone with pride, as if she was another trophy to add to the family's collection of moral accomplishments. They whispered about how fortunate I was, how well matched we seemed. For a while it felt like I had finally earned my place, finally measured up to the impossible standards set for me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, my life would make them proud. Our relationship grew in small, beautiful ways. She gasped, clutching her chest like she had just witnessed a scandal unfold in front of her. My father went pale, his jaw locking into a hard, unforgiving line. Across the table, Thayer leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint sneer playing at the edges of his mouth. Silence swallowed the room whole. For a moment I thought maybe they were just shocked, that it would pass, that the love they had shown Elowen before would outweigh the disappointment. Then came the lectures, the disappointment, the accusations. They didn't ask how Elowen was feeling. They didn't ask if we were okay, if we needed support, if we were scared. Instead, they asked if we still planned to have the wedding. Their voices clipped and cold, like we had committed some unspeakable betrayal against them personally. I said yes, of course we did. We loved each other. We were already engaged. What difference did it make? Apparently, to them, it made all the difference in the world. Their eyes, once so warm when they looked at Elowen, were now filled with disappointment and shame. My mother shook her head slowly, murmuring about what the church would think, about what the neighbors would say. My father spoke of good Christian values, about how our family has a reputation to uphold, about how standing with me would condone sin. It was like I had become a stranger to them in a matter of minutes. I tried to reason with them. I pleaded. I told them that love was not supposed to be conditional, that a baby was a blessing, not a curse. I begged them to see Elowen for who she was, for who we were together, but their faces remained hard, unmoved. My father finally ended it, his voice flat and final. They would not attend. They could not, in good conscience, support a wedding tainted by scandal. He said we should move the ceremony out of town, hide it away, so they wouldn't have to answer uncomfortable questions. In their eyes, it was not about family. It was about saving face. One by one, the rest of the family followed. Thayer smirked and said he had no intention of looking like a fool in front of his church peers. Blythe suddenly came down with a convenient illness that would prevent her from attending. Caius claimed a last-minute business trip, and Alaric didn't even bother pretending. He screamed at me over the phone, ripped up the invitation, and told me never to speak to him again. It felt like being disowned, piece by piece, by every person who had ever claimed to love me. It felt like drowning, and there was no one reaching in to pull me out. We went ahead with the wedding. It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, but the undercurrent of absence was a tangible, aching thing. The morning of the wedding, Elowen and I barely spoke. It was not out of fear or second thoughts, but a kind of fragile tenderness, like if we said too much we might fall apart. I remember standing by the window in my tiny rented suit, watching the early light spill across the churchyard, feeling a mix of hope and grief that I could not put into words. I wanted so desperately for the day to be about us, about our love and the family we were starting, not about the people who chose not to show up. Elowen wore a simple ivory dress. No lace, no beading, just soft fabric that caught the light when she moved. She looked breathtaking, ethereal, strong and fragile all at once. When she appeared at the end of the aisle, my breath caught so hard in my chest I had to remind myself to exhale. The church itself was beautiful in a humble way. Stained glass windows filtered in colored light that danced across the pews. Fresh white lilies filled the air with a soft, sweet fragrance. The wooden pews creaked quietly as guests shifted in their seats, and yet there was a hollowness to it that no amount of flowers or sunlight could fill. The rows behind Elowen were full. Her parents, her siblings, friends from work and school. They smiled warmly, clapped when she stepped through the door, beamed like the whole world was right. My side was barren. Empty pews stretched out like open wounds. No parents, no siblings, no cousins, no aunts, no uncles. Each absence felt like a slap. Each empty seat was a reminder that love in my family had limits, and I had crossed them. I stood at the altar, smiling at her, because what else could I do? I locked my knees to keep from crumbling. I focused on Eloin's eyes, the way they shone with unshed tears that were not entirely sadness and not entirely joy. We had each other. We had love. And even though a whole lifetime of people I had once counted on had abandoned me, I still had this. When the ceremony ended, when we were pronounced husband and wife, when we walked back down the aisle to the sound of cheers and applause from Eloin's family and friends, I held it together. I smiled. I nodded. I thanked people for coming. I kissed my wife and posed for photographs and ate a slice of cake. But inside, a part of me was breaking quietly, piece by piece, until we got into the car. The moment the door shut, the dam inside me burst. I broke down sobbing, ugly and raw, with no pride left to hold it back. I cried so hard my chest ached, like my body was trying to force all the pain out at once. Every breath felt jagged, every sob ripped straight from somewhere deep inside that I had kept hidden for too long. I clutched the steering wheel, pressing my forehead against it, as if the weight of everything crashing down could somehow be steadied by holding onto something solid. Eloin reached across the console and grabbed my hand, holding it so tightly it hurt, grounding me in a way that words never could. Her tears fell freely too, but she wasn't falling apart like I was. She was steady, even in her grief, a lifeline in a storm I could barely stand in. Through her own tears, she whispered, "We have each other. We are enough. They don't get to define our happiness." Her voice shook, but there was a certainty in it that wrapped around me like armor. I turned to look at her, really look at her. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly undone from the day's chaos, and yet she had never looked more beautiful to me. She was the embodiment of everything I had fought so hard to find. Love without conditions, family without terms. Even as my heart shattered and rebuilt itself inside that car, a small, steady voice in my head agreed with her. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger with each passing second, drowning out the echoes of rejection and shame that had filled my life for so long. We had each other. We were our own family now. And somehow, despite the gaping wounds left by the people who should have loved me most, that felt like the most precious, unshakable truth I had ever known. For months, I couldn't bring myself to call any of them. At first there was a dull ache that lingered in the back of my mind, a shadow that followed me through the days. But slowly, as the world narrowed down to just Eloin and me, that ache softened, life moved forward, and for the first time it was a life entirely our own. The days after our wedding were quiet in a way that healed. We built a home together, not a grand one, but one filled with warmth. Eloin would hum while making coffee in the mornings, her voice drifting through the rooms like sunlight. I would come home from work to find her curled up on the couch, a book in one hand, the other absent-mindedly resting on her growing belly. We made space for laughter again. We made space for hope. We painted the nursery ourselves, arguing playfully over shades of green and yellow until we finally agreed on a soft, warm color that felt like morning light. We hung little wooden stars from the ceiling, and every night before bed we would sit in that room together, dreaming about the tiny person who would soon fill it with life. There were no grand announcements, no Instagram-perfect photo shoots, no showers thrown by a bustling, proud family, but there was love in every brushstroke, in every folded onesie, in every whispered goodnight to a baby still cradled inside Eloin. Cassian was born 4 weeks ago. My son, my beautiful, perfect little boy. I will never forget the first time I held him, the weight of him against my chest, the way his tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine, as if he already knew he was safe. In that moment, the world outside our hospital room ceased to exist. There was no church gossip, no abandoned pews, no cold silences. There was only Cassian's soft breathing and the steady, fierce thrum of love that filled every corner of my being. Holding him, I felt a kind of love I didn't know existed. Not the performative love I grew up with, tied to conditions and expectations. This was pure, undeniable, unbreakable. It was the kind of love that didn't care about appearances or reputations. It simply was. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what it meant to be part of a family, a real one. Then, 2 weeks after Cassian's birth, Caius showed up at my door with a box of gifts. He stood there awkwardly on the porch, shuffling his feet like a schoolboy caught doing something wrong. The box in his hands was wrapped in soft blue paper, too carefully arranged to feel casual. I could see the discomfort etched in every line of his body, but I could also see the determination, the mission he had been sent on by the family. Soft blankets, toys, baby clothes, all carefully chosen, expensive brands, tags still on, as if money could patch over abandonment. He said the family had sent them, that everyone was excited to meet Cassian, that they wanted to be a part of his life. I refused the gifts. I gave the box right back without hesitation. The look on Caius's face shifted, confusion, then hurt, and finally a thin layer of resentment that he tried to hide but couldn't. We sat awkwardly at my kitchen table. The room felt colder than it should have, the ticking of the clock on the wall sounding louder with every passing second. Caius cleared his throat and said Mom was longing to meet her grandson, that the family wanted to visit, that despite everything, we were still family, and blood was blood. I looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Wasn't Cassian the reason you all abandoned me at my wedding?" He stammered. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He tried to spin it, said I misunderstood, that it wasn't about Cassian, it was about timing and appearances. He tried to paint it like a miscommunication, a mistake that somehow absolved them of the deliberate choice they had made to hurt us. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply told him the truth, my voice steady, each word a weight I was finally done carrying for them. You treated my son like he was a stain, like he was something to hide. You made me feel like I should be ashamed of the best thing that ever happened to me. One day Cassian will ask about my wedding. I will not lie to him. Caius shifted uncomfortably, but kept pressing, his voice tight with frustration. He insisted that Cassian needed family, that no matter what happened between the adults, I couldn't deny my son the connection he was entitled to. I replied, family doesn't turn its back when things aren't perfect. Family doesn't abandon you on the most important day of your life. Family doesn't treat a child like an inconvenience. There was nothing left to say after that. He left without another word, the door clicking softly behind him like a final nail sealing a coffin. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the box he had tried to force into my arms. I thought about how easy it would be to give in, to let them step back into my life without consequences, to pretend none of it had happened. But every thread of my being screamed against it. Eloan found me there, silent and unmoving, and knelt beside me. She rested her head against my shoulder, and whispered that maybe, just maybe, letting them see Cassian would be healing for all of us. I turned to her, saw the tenderness in her eyes, but also the exhaustion, the same exhaustion I carried, and I knew I couldn't do it. Not yet. Because healing could not begin where wounds were still being denied. Because I was not going to sacrifice my son's trust and innocence just to make adults who had already broken my heart feel better about themselves. But I couldn't. Not after what happened next. Through a mutual family friend, I found out the real reason the urgency to reconnect had exploded. It wasn't just guilt. It wasn't love. It was legacy. After Silas's stroke, they realized that Thayer had no children and wasn't exactly living the model Christian life they had boasted about for years. Caius had left the church altogether. The family name, the Christian legacy, was hanging by a thread. Cassian was the only boy, the only hope to keep their name pure, their reputation intact. They didn't want my son because they loved him. They wanted him because he was useful, a symbol, a redemption story they could parade around. The thought made me physically ill. I imagined Cassian growing up surrounded by people who did not love him for who he was, but for what he could represent. I imagined him carrying a burden he never asked for, a burden that had already nearly broken me once before, and I swore to myself he would never ever feel that way. I swore he would know he was loved simply because he existed, that he would never have to earn it, that he would never question his place, that he would never beg for scraps of affection from people who only saw him as a vessel for their own pride. They kept texting, calling. My mother left voicemails, crying, saying she missed me, saying she missed us. My father sent stiff, formal messages about how time heals all wounds. Thayer sent a half-hearted "you need to grow up" text that almost made me laugh. But never once did anyone say the words that mattered. "I'm sorry." Not once. Instead, the messages turned sharp, passive-aggressive, as if their hurt feelings now outweighed everything they had done. "Still holding a grudge? You need to forgive. It's the Christian way. Don't let your pride ruin Cassian's chance at knowing his family." Every word felt like another slap, another confirmation that they still did not understand, that maybe they never would. And then they showed up. One evening, as the sun was sinking low and Elowen was rocking Cassian to sleep, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there they were. My parents. Thayer, Blythe, Caius, all standing there, with expectant, strained faces. Marlowe was already crying before she spoke. "Please," she said, reaching for my hand. "Please let us see him. Let us make this right." Silas stood stiffly behind her, his mouth tight, his arms crossed, his eyes darting everywhere except to meet mine. Thayer muttered something about being family no matter what. Caius added, "You can't keep him from us forever." They crowded the doorway, desperate, tearful, pleading. But not once did anyone say, "We are sorry for how we treated you." Not once did anyone acknowledge what they had done. All they wanted was access. Access to Cassian. Access to the second chance their pride still refused to earn. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, leaving my son and my wife safe inside. I told them everything I had bottled up for years. How it felt growing up in a house where love was earned, not given. How it felt to stand at the altar alone. How it felt to hold my newborn son, knowing they had disowned us before they even knew him. How it felt to finally have a family of my own, and how I would do anything to protect it. They tried to argue. They tried to guilt me. Marlowe sobbed that the Lord teaches forgiveness. Silas barked that you owe your family a chance to repent. Thayer accused me of being selfish. I stood there, shaking, tears stinging my own eyes, not from sadness, but from pure, righteous fury. "You do not get to show up now," I said. "You do not get to skip the part where you abandoned me. You do not get to act like Cassian is a prize to be claimed, because your perfect little legacy fell apart. He is not your redemption. He is not your second chance. He is my son, and you will not touch him. Not now, maybe not ever." Marlowe collapsed into Silas's arms, sobbing. Blythe covered her mouth in shock. Thayer muttered something about me being lost before storming off. One by one, they turned and left. No apologies. No real remorse. Only the bitterness of people who realized too late that their power no longer reached me. I went back inside, where Elowen and Cassian waited, bathed in the soft golden light of our living room. Elowen looked up, worried, but I just shook my head and sat down next to her. I held Cassian against my chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat thudding steadily against mine. And I knew I was not cutting them off out of anger. I was cutting them off out of love. Love for myself. Love for my wife. Love for my son. Because I knew that if I let them back in without true change, without real accountability, all I would be teaching Cassian was that it was okay to let people hurt you as long as they called themselves family. And that is not the kind of man I want my son to become. So, no, they will not meet him. Not until they understand. Not until they come to him with humility, not expectation. Not until they say the words that should have come the day they turned their backs on us. Maybe that day will come. Maybe it won't. But for now, my son is safe. My family, the real one Elowen and I, are building, is whole, and for the first time in my life, I am at peace. Was I wrong?